All right, everyone, welcome. We are live. We're going to give it just a few minutes for some folks to trickle in, and then we'll begin the chat. All right, everyone, let's get started. Thank you so much for being here today or this evening, depending on your time zone. So my name is Adrienne Boris, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Helios Opera. Thrilled to welcome you here today, and equally thrilled to welcome Ms. Chay Jones, who is with us. And we're just so excited to have her here to talk about this piece because of her specific interests as a filmmaker and screenwriter. And I think you'll see why. She began her creative journey writing drama and science fiction novels for young adults. She was mentored by screenwriters at the University of Pennsylvania and went on to complete her MFA in screenwriting for film and television from Boston University's School of Communications. She became immersed with creating a visual story, taking up videography, and producing post-grad. Her thriller television pilot, Kane, placed in the International Final Draft Big Break contest just as she moved into the world of higher education. She is an adjunct professor of script for film at Emerson College and has also led film courses at Lesley University and Boston University. Chay is now creative directing to bring forth the visions and ideas of her team and collaborators. In her writing, she explores themes of time space, the multiverse, ancestral ties, and what it truly means to be human. As a producer and director, Chay is most passionate about finding the story, whether that is the emotional center of a commercial or the human connections in a short film. She is currently working on writing a dystopian sci-fi fantasy television series. She is also producing and directing music video projects with her collaborators. Um, so with that, I am going to ask the creative team of Stardust, who's here with us for this talk, to go around and introduce themselves, and then we will hand it over to Chay. So Victoria, maybe we could start with you today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria Davis, originally from Washington, D.C., currently residing in Brooklyn, New York. I was the singer for this fabulous project, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Gerard. I'm the composer of Stardust, and I was the collaborative pianist for the performance. I'm from Connecticut, and I currently live in Brooklyn, New York as well. And my pronouns are he, him, his.
Keith, do you want to go?
Hi, everyone. My name is Keith Browning. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. I now reside in New York City. I was the assistant director and director of photography, and my pronouns are he, him, his.
Julian?
I'm Julian. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Helios Opera, and I edited the video for Stardust, and my pronouns are he, him, and his.
John?
Hi, I'm John De Los Santos. I am the director of Stardust. I was born in San Antonio, Texas, but now live in Manhattan, and pronouns are he, him, his.
And BL Foxley.
Stardust.
Hi, I'm BL Foxley. I write the text for Stardust, and I'm based in London. Sorry, my pronouns are she and her.
All right, Chay, so feel free to start us off. And if there's anything you'd like to say about yourself that I didn't say in the intro, please go ahead.
Sure. I guess I'll just add that I am a Boston native as well and still in Boston, and my pronouns are she and hers. But yeah, just to jump in and get started, such a neat project, and so full of color and life, and gone through different mediums of storytelling. And I just love that it's gone through such a journey and to have witnessed and experienced it. So I kind of wanted to just start off with directing at John about how the film was made generally. How did you get started in that process, and how was that for you? And anyone else can add in and jump into that answering that question as well.
Yeah, so this all began when Felix contacted me about applying for the position. And when I looked at the pieces, I was trying to figure out what can I do to tie these three together into a narrative, because the poems were not written to be performed together. They were chosen as ones that Felix found had the most musical potential, and then he crafted the cycle around that. And so I was trying to see what is a visual metaphor that we can use for these. And I realized that in each one of the poems, there's a reference to a myth of some kind. And so I thought, well, wait a minute, maybe I can separate each one into a different myth. You have the myth of Mother Nature, which is found in almost every religion. You have the myth of the devil or hell, which is also pretty ubiquitous. And then in the first one, you have the myth of racial equality, something that we're wrestling with right now, with, how that's not, we believe in something that really is not the case, and we have to really work on. And so I thought, if I have each one separated by a different myth, then maybe I can draw a mythology to tie them together. And so the idea of the Moirai, these three ancient deities who spin the thread of life and decide how long it is and then cut it, that seemed to me a really interesting way to bring these together and assign each one of the myths to a different one of the three sisters. And so, working with Victoria was really great, because she was able to very subtly differentiate between the three goddesses and really give them each a different POV, which was tricky because obviously the POV that we had was pretty limited, because I really wanted to emulate the Andy Warhol film Chelsea Girls and John Waters' film Roman Candles with the three screens, but also to kind of do a nod to the time we're living in, which is COVID and Zoom. So the idea being that we focus just on what we see in that area. So that was kind of the first visual perspective that I was looking at. And then I brought Keith along, who had some really great ideas too. So I'd love to have him talk about that.
Yeah, thanks, John. Joining the project was really interesting for me because this is my first time being on this side of the production, of any production, quite frankly. And so as I started to dive into how I was going to put my creative spin on this, I happened to watch Silence of the Lambs for the first time in my life, because
Oh, wow.
and I recognized the distinct color palette in the movie. I went on to do a little more research into color theory and found that specifically that movie was revolutionary in terms of how they used color, how it related to each character. So I jumped in thinking, great, we have three sisters, three deities, as John said. How are each of them going to have their own color, and how are they all going to tie in together? Obviously, with the devil, we were going to play with red, but I specifically thought of a scene in which Clarice first meets Hannibal Lecter. His tint is very like stone cold gray and blue, but she's in more of like red and green. So I was thinking, okay, we're not going to put red all over Victoria just because it's the devil. We need to find a way to have the red tempt her with the color. So having her in a little bit of a gray white, and then the red behind her, and obviously with the devil's eyes, the devil door, that was the way that we play with that. With Who Am I specifically wanted to go for a pink because that represents like innocence. But what ended up happening was, because of her blue shirt, we got more purple, and that brought me to thinking of how purple is sometimes means rich and royalty. So thinking about just what John said, the myth of racial inequality, seeing how Black women are royalty, at least to me, ties that color in for purple. And then with the last one with gold is just the nod to the supernova that we see at the end, the birth of this new woman. But gold also means enlightenment in a way. So wanting to just make sure each of those colors was distinct for each of the pieces to fit in with the triptych theme that we had going on was my contribution.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that you spoke on the color, because I feel as though the color really, really jumped out to me and definitely helped to evoke different emotions. I felt the royalty, you know, in the purple, and also felt like a sense of wonder. And then the red really dives into that eerie, you know, creepy feel. And then the final coloring definitely felt warm, like a little bit more homey. So if that's what you were going for, I definitely felt that. And I thought that was amazing. And I think that kind of, sorry.
I was just saying thank you.
I think that kind of ties into just wondering too about, you know, the times of COVID. I love that you kind of, John, that you incorporated the feeling of Zoom and that kind of like isolation. I wonder about the process of making the film during COVID and the different tech limitations or creativities that you were allowed through that process. And I think anyone can answer on that.
Yeah, Victoria, do you want to talk about that a little bit, about what the filming process was like?
So the filming process was very interesting. First off, I've never personally seen a song cycle premiered in such a way that is almost reminiscent of a music video of pop culture. So that in itself was very different and unique, especially because I get to kind of claim that these songs were written for my voice. So that plays a part. But secondly, it was interesting because there was still an air of collaborative experience throughout the process. John and Keith were very much so lights, camera, action directors, of course, but it was almost like a family in this 10 by 10 small room of working with, and I bring this up every conversation we have, 2 IKEA lights, an Android, an iPhone, a black drop, with 3 shirts and making it work. But I think the thing that was most striking, and I said this in our last discussion, was how during COVID, being in a room with these 2 gentlemen and my partner, who also helped out in some ways, we weren't able to touch. Artists, for the most part, are very touchy-feely. We're very interpersonal creatures. We like high fives. We like fist bumps. We like hugs. We love hugs. But I can't remember one time in the 10 or 12 hours that I was in this room with them, in this building with them, where we actually literally touched. So that was very interesting, collaborating in such an intimate fashion with vulnerability and these three different topics, and exploring that in human nature for all three of us and discussing that, but never really making any physical contact. So I would say that that was interesting. Of course, being in a room with masks also played a part. There wasn't, I can't think of any times where the mask actually came off, except for me, but it was interesting. It was foreign, but it was still beautiful. The experience and the collaboration that can still come out. So it really does let you know that art is an imitation of life, and we can really get through anything that 2020 brings, and prayerfully nothing else happens. But it was a foreign but beautiful experience.
Yeah, and I can only imagine like the unique beauty of being able to create something like this under, the pressures and the limitations and things. And I love that. It's so inspiring to know that art, it lives, it doesn't need some of these other, requirements that maybe larger movies will need, no matter what, if something comes out of it. So yeah, I can only imagine. Does anyone else want to add to that or about the process?
I'll say just a brief bit. The fact that we have been confined to creating art with these limitations has, for lack of a better word, enlightened at least me to know that you can't be limited to the specific art form in which you have been raised. I said this in our last conversation that I've mostly been an opera singer, but coming on this side and realizing how I can really just splash around in the puddle of creativity has been quite incredible.
I think for me, I think COVID has really opened up in terms of getting to work with people that I probably wouldn't have worked with before, when I can't go down to a coffee shop and meet maybe a composer that's based in London. And so that opened up working with people abroad in different time zones and from completely different backgrounds in terms of work. And we got to create something like this that I don't think any of us could say we'd have worked on something like this in this manner if we weren't restricted in terms of how many people we can have in the room or where we can talk to people. So I definitely believe that chaos feeds the art. And I really feel like COVID allowed us to create something that was out of all of our comfort zones.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on what BL said, because usually the process is very different, especially on the musical side of things, because usually I'm a collaborative pianist, so when I usually collaborate with singers I work with, it's all in person. So like Victoria will come to my studio, she'll sing through the song, we'll have rehearsal, but because of the pandemic, that's unfortunately not possible. So we all had to do it virtually. So that would mean me sending her the score and then asking her, hey, can you send me a timing of this phrase? Because I have to lay down the piano track before she sings. So it's basically like the most extreme version of karaoke you can think of, is just how I always describe it. And so it involves like a little bit of pre-planning, actually quite a bit of pre-planning. And Victoria and I worked on it over FaceTime. So it allowed us to like really challenge ourselves and see how far we could go. And the whole point of the work is like we all go to the cosmos at the end. So it was kind of like a metaphor for, I think, what we were all trying to do with this project.
No, I love that. And that ties into talking more generally about like the genre of the pieces and the sci-fi elements. I do a lot of work in sci-fi and absolutely love that genre and all that it lends to you through imagination, creativity, and there's just no limits. And so I wanted to direct a question towards you, VL, about your work in the sci-fi realm and what draws you to that genre or these pieces.
Me, fantasy and sci-fi is a world that's limitless, and it actually feels more relevant than ever right now when we're living with so many limits in London. And we're out of lockdown, but we've got a tier system, so we can't have be around more than 6 people at a time. And getting to create something where you get to pick the rules, you get to pick, what's a sign of strength and what's a sign of weakness, which can be completely opposite from this world. It was really fun getting to do that in a form of a poem, and then bringing music and then a production into it with John and Keith. So just to sum up, like a long answer for that. I love the limit. I love the fact that we can. There's no word of no in fantasy. If I wrote a poem or a story, usually saying someone fell off a 5-story building, I think we can all know how that's going to end. But in fantasy, I could say that they landed on their feet and they just carry on running. And I think right now the world needs fantasy to escape from everything and set their own rules.
Right, or even get into the mindset where anything is possible, where you can birth more creativity. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that for my own writing and just even in the projects that I like to watch. Well, we can kind of switch gears a little bit to the next question that I had, which was about the music and the singing. And we've got the 3 different screens and different characters that are singing together. And I wanted to know about thoughts behind overlapping the singing or singing in a round or having discord amongst the singing. Like I was just wondering about that because I've not ever seen this kind of project come together with narrating with different songs. So I wanted to know about the creative process behind how did you decide if you were going to differentiate between the characters and their singing and whether that would be overlapping in different ways or not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I had actually spoken to Felix at one point about a moment when I really wanted 2 of the sisters to sing at the same time. And I was like, is it possible to like overdub the voices? And the thing is that in an art song like this, that's really, really tricky to do, especially if we only have one shot at recording it. So I think that it just wouldn't have sounded right. It would have been tricky because it was really composed for a single voice. Felix, is that correct? Am I expressing that?
It's for a single soprano voice. That's correct.
Yeah, but we definitely did talk about it. But then I thought to myself that, if these 3 sisters really are, they're always referred to together. You would never pray to just one of the 3. It's always a triptych, a trilogy. These 3 sisters are one. So the idea that they all kind of share the same disembodied voice throughout, and sometimes one is singing and sometimes they're not, or they're, it didn't have to be quite as in sync as, a regular song cycle. But yeah, we did talk a lot about how do we differentiate, because it's tricky to do it subtly with that, the camera that close. But, Keith's lighting scheme really helped out a lot. And also Felix really composed something that built. It didn't just remain at the same level. Each song builds on itself in a different way thematically, so that by the end, you really have this wonderful. When the first time I heard Mother Nature, I thought, oh my God, we have to have this supernova. We have to have this explosion of a star on that climactic note because it's so powerful. So yeah, there was a lot of clues in the music of how to achieve all of those things.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And just to keep talking about Mother Nature, because of the culmination of activity, excitement, and also visuals, it stood out to me, the adornments and her accessories, and it seemed as though her characters were all becoming more alive and more themselves. And I wanted to ask about the visual inspiration, cultural inspirations, how that came about. It was really just beautiful visuals, and anyone can jump in on that.
Victoria?
If you hear any New York City sounds in my background, I do apologize. There is construction above my head. So I really love Greek mythology generally. I think it's so cool. Hercules, the real Hercules from Disney, inspired a lot of my thoughts behind the jewelry and the accessories. But also, I'm Black. So I didn't want to just portray something from a different culture. I wanted to add something that is a huge part of who I am and what my culture represents. And so for Mother Nature, the idea that I had, and I text John about it as soon as I thought about it really, was about the Orishas. Yemeya, it was about John the Conjurer. Excuse me, he's not from the Yoruba religious background, but he plays a huge part in voodoo and hoodoo and conjure work. And the crossroads with him, how he is a trickster, but he's kind of there for you in this really weird abstract way. And what am I just playing on Yemeya and the goddess of the river in Yoruba tradition, and her relatability to what womanism or femininity is in African diasporas, specifically with the Yoruba tradition. So I have to give a shout out to my mom because she's a big jewelry person. And so anytime she sees really funky, chunky pieces, she'll say, here, I bought this, wear it. And a shout out to the beautiful star piece that I wore in Mother Nature, which was my grandmother's, because she also loved really chunky, funky jewelry. And so we wanted to add, as Keith said before, a hint of royalty and what that represents in Black culture with women. We usually speak to each other as kings or queens. That's just a part of the dialect, the conversations that happen. That's not something that's uncommon. And I think that was a huge theme in Mother Nature. Even if themselves didn't realize it in the beginning, but by the end of that piece, it was, they didn't necessarily need the adornment. It was just a part of who they were as an entity. Also, it would behoove me to say for the beautiful earring, shout out to my friend Sam, because she actually gifted me those like 2 days before we filmed. But that was the inspiration for all of the pieces, but very specifically with Mother Nature and the head coverings and the adornment of the hair pieces. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, for sure. And I really love it, all in depth. And I just love how collaborative it was with all the people who are near to you, culturally and like locally because of the times. And so I thought that really answered my question. Thank you.
Shay, I'd like to add just a little bit. You actually mentioned something after I spoke the first time, in that in Mother Nature, with the color and the feel, it felt very homey and very warm. And something that I realized after watching it through the first time, it was like, this person has arrived, which is after you have the supernova, you see this new birthed woman, this regal figure who is also stripped of those adornments, and you're seeing them as a regal person without anything, just stripped down to the very elements of who they are, which I think in terms of a through line, you have this thread and the cutting of the thread and the measuring it out. You're seeing a human person being actualized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing is, that final shot, when you have the almost the memory of the supernova on one side of the screen, and then the shadow, there's pieces of all three of them still in that. And so the idea being that this new life that has been given birth by these three deities, she has a piece of them. She is the Stardust. We are all Stardust that originate from this same entity. And it's something that no one has ever really asked about are the series of gestures that we did. That was kind of just an interesting, to me, that was sort of how within, again, the short, the frame, how do we create the idea of conjuring, the idea of mysticism, the idea of magic? And to me, just a very, and Victoria and I collaborated on all three of them on how they were going to look, because we were like, that doesn't quite look good. Let's try something different. So yeah, choreographic roots definitely showed up there too.
No, that's great. And I really loved the final shot at the end. And I knew that that lighting was intentional because it was so, so different, from all the other shots we'd seen before. So
I should say about the ending. The ending actually came from Julien, our brilliant editor, because I wrote a screenplay of the whole thing, and there were lots of crazy things that I had in mind. And then when I sent Julien all the footage, there were certain things. He tried everything I wrote, and not everything I wrote looked great with what we had. And then he always had so many amazing plan Bs and plan Cs of how to achieve the theme with a different, just a different composition. But Julien, do you want to say anything about the editing?
Yeah, I'll say a few words. Thanks, John. So yeah, basically my job was to kind of make John's vision appear on screen based on the great footage that he and Keith and Victoria sent me. And sometimes it was, very easy because John, again, made it very easy for me to follow his train of thought and wrote everything down and shared his vision. And so it was pretty clear to me where we were going. But sometimes through cropping the image or playing with the colors, I was like, oh, maybe that could work, and maybe that could actually reinforce what John has in mind. And so I would send him, as he said, plan B, plan C, and in the end, he's the director, so he made the final decisions. But we had a great dialogue, and we had a few iterations. We were like, can we try this? Yeah, that may look good. Can we change this slightly, this transition, or try this effect? And it was a very efficient process because, and it had to, because we were not in the same city. So we did everything online, and it was not. We didn't even have we didn't have a Zoom session or a Skype. It was all by email, and so it had to be very clear, very efficient. But also we had to remain open to each other's feedback and ideas, and I think that worked really great.
Yeah, and just to kind of follow up, another question for you, Julien. When I see the three screens and some of the strobing effects and things like that, I automatically think about the editor and how much of an edited piece this is. I thought it was a really, really beautiful, beautiful outcome. And I wanted to know if you ran into any, challenges or any creative solutions that were portrayed in the film.
Yeah, a few of them. To be completely fair, though, I was working with great raw material. The footage that was sent to me by John and Keith and Victoria looked great. So that was already a relief, because sometimes you get footage and you're like, well, what can I do with this? It's not going to work. It was not the case with Stardust, so that was a great start. And then obviously when you try things and you start cropping the footage and placing the three screens next to each other, you realize, oh, okay, maybe we should flip these two, or maybe we should crop this one a little bit more to be closer to Victoria's expressions, or we should mirror the left and right screen, because then you have that kind of twin effect between the sisters. And so I guess the challenges were not so much in the technical aspects of the editing. It was more how do we best reflect John's vision and play with that, with the themes of mythology and the three deities, and how that all fits into the narrative across the three pieces. So it's more, I guess the challenges were more on the artistic side of things, and how do we use effects, and how do we use these screens, and how do you play with the transitions, the colors to fit with John's vision. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes complete sense too.
Thank you
you.
so much, Shay. We're going to move to audience questions now, if that's okay. I'm not sure if you can see them, but it looks like there's one from Arthur. Can you see that? It was a little bit further up the...
Yeah, we have a question from Arthur, and he wanted to know how Victoria was able to stay so still.
Should I answer that? I just sat and stayed. I mean, there wasn't any. Well, first of all, let me say that for meeting these two gentlemen for the first time in recording, and then another day when we recorded again, it was extremely comfortable for me. I was very comfortable. I felt like I had known them for at least 10 years of my life, and we were just doing a mini high school reunion or something. So I think that was it. I didn't have any reason to be jittery or nervous. And they also let me do nothing aside from just lip sync. So I think that also played a part. As I said before, they wouldn't even let me touch my own chair. So the very least that I can do is just sit and stay still and do my part. So comfort, I guess, would be a big part of that.
And Arthur, the other thing is that since all of this was pre-recorded, we didn't have to have any sound on the set. And so if you were to watch the raw footage of this, Victoria looks very serene and still, but I'm off camera going, hold still, don't move, quiet, don't move, no, okay, great, we got it, perfect. So there was a lot of talking and direction going on behind the camera to keep her to get those eye movements really subtly or whatever it was that you'll never hear.
Good direction and familiarity. Yeah.
There should be a blooper reel. Seriously, there should be a blooper reel.
I was going to say, not until the director's cut is released in 2021.
The blooper reel of the threads in front of her face is one of my favorites, because we achieved that literally by having her partner Daniel and Keith pulling these cheap Michaels threads on either side of her face, and me just telling him, faster, faster, quicker, angles, angles, angles. Great, get rid of them.
Great. Shay, is there anything you'd like to say to wrap us up before I do, or anybody on the team?
Well, I can just, add and say it was great to watch these and really like analyze and see how it transformed, from poems to script to film to song to film, and it was an honor to be a part of it.
Thanks, Shay, and thank you so much to our beautiful, generous artists, as always, for taking part in these talks. And thank you to our fantastic audience for joining us today. So you'll be getting a thank you email, I think, tomorrow morning, if you want to look out for that. We do have a second weekend of screenings, so we're doing this 2 more times with a unique special guest each time. Our hashtags are Stardust 2020 and hashtag The Devil Was Me. So now you get that hashtag. So if you would like to be, as we call it, Stardusted, we invite you to post on your personal feed, whether it's Instagram story, grid, Facebook story, feed, whatever you want, with 1 to 3 favorite selfies of yourself and a short review, 1 or 2 sentences of what you thought of the show, and we will repost that and Stardustize you, so you'll look just like aesthetically Victoria did in the show, and it'll be great fun. So we hope you take part in that. We hope you tell your friends and family to tune in for our screenings next weekend. It was great to see you. Please take care of yourselves. Be well. Thank you again to Chay Jones and our creative team. Good afternoon or evening. Bye, everybody.